months after her arrest and incarceration there, WNBA star Brittany Griner is headed home.
Yeah, breaking and welcome news. Russia has agreed to a prisoner swap with the U.S. We're going to go straight to NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. She has these breaking details. Andrea, what can you tell us?
Good morning, Savannah and Hoda. Well, according to a senior administration official, Brittany Griner is free after 294 days in Russian captivity. The last month spent in one of Russia's notoriously harsh penal colonies. She was traded for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout, who Vladimir Putin has been trying to get back, and who had served 11 years of a 25-year sentence in the U.S. President Biden signed off on the trade, even though it meant leaving another American, businessman Paul Waylon, behind bars in Russia. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying the U.S. has been actively engaged in discussions with Russia about a possible prisoner swap to free Brittany Griner and Paul Waylon.
We have to see if the engagements that we've had, the discussions that we have, produce an actual result.
Griner, the 32-year-old WNBA superstar, has spent nearly 10 months in Russian custody. Arrested at a Moscow airport in February, she admitted to bringing less than a gram of medicinal cannabis into the country, but said she never intended to break any law. Her plight sparked an outpouring from her family, teammates, and fans. Griner's wife, Sherelle.
I'm frustrated that my wife is not going to get justice. I know you all are frustrated too, that's why you're here.
Sentenced to 9 years in prison, Griner appealed, pleading for leniency from behind bars.
This has been a very traumatic experience waiting for this day.
But she was denied. President Biden last month.
I'm telling you, I am determined to get her home and get her home safely, along with others, I might add.
The other American held by Russia will not be coming home. Paul Waylon, a former Marine, a businessman, detained 4 years ago, is serving a 16-year prison sentence after being accused of spying, which the U.S. strongly denies. Waylon's family later raised concerns about his safety, which I asked the Secretary of State about last week.
We're working to bring him home, to bring Brittany Griner home. But this is, again, what we see Russia doing in terms of abusing the very basic understandings that countries have had when it comes to having access to our citizens who are being detained.
Those familiar with these very hard negotiations say that the Russians absolutely refuse to release Paul Waylon without getting a Russian spy in return. But the U.S. insists it does not have any Russian spies in U.S. custody. So the administration says it had no one to trade to meet that Russian demand. And again, the U.S. maintains that Paul Waylon is wrongfully detained. He's a businessman, not a spy. And just now we also got a statement from the group that has been campaigning for all of these hostages to be released from all over the world, actually, saying Paul Waylon has been let down and left behind by at least 3 times by 2 American presidents. He deserves better from his government, and our campaign implores President Biden to urgently secure Paul's immediate return using all tools available. We understand the president will be speaking shortly or later this morning.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you very much. The breaking news, Brittany Griner has been freed. Paul Waylon left behind. Let's go to Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander at the White House. What's the word there, Peter?
Savannah, we do expect to hear from President Biden at 8:30, so 15 minutes from now. And we have just learned that Sherelle Griner, Brittany Griner's wife, is right now in the Oval Office here at the White House. She is behind closed doors with the president. The two of them were able to speak by phone earlier this morning with Brittany Griner after she was returned to U.S. custody. And then, as we understand it, Sherelle was able to have a private conversation with her wife, Brittany, from the president's study. But this concludes for the Griner family what has just been a very distressing situation over the course of the last 10 months. The president has said this was a top priority. He had exchanged a letter with Griner in the past, who wrote him over the summer saying that she was terrified she would be there forever in Russian custody. The good news this morning that the White House will certainly be celebrating today is the release of Brittany Griner. And again, to repeat, Sherelle Griner.
The Biden administration made the right decision to bring Ms. Griner home and to make the deal that was possible rather than waiting for one that wasn't going to happen. Now, when Trevor Reed was released earlier this year, the family released a statement. Paul Waylon said, "Why was I left behind?" But that is not happening this time. David said in the statement, "It is so important to me to make clear that we do not begrudge Ms. Griner her freedom." But he said, at some level, our family has steeled ourselves for this likelihood, despite the possibility that there might be an exchange without Paul. Our family is still devastated. They, of course, George, are very worried about his health. He has been there 4 years and has many 12 years to go on that sentence. So there is a lot of worry in the Waylon family, but again, an incredibly gracious statement. And President Biden, of course, mentioned that he will stay on this case, and Sherelle as well.
And Martha, we also heard President Biden say that the Russians insist on treating Paul Waylon's case differently. At minimum, he's another bargaining chip.
And another bargaining chip, I guess they weren't about to release 2 people who are being detained for just a Viktor Bout, although that is a major exchange, excuse me, So the Russians will try something else, you can imagine. But this is a very different case, and the Whelans say that as well. Paul Waylon was accused of spying, and they claim, again, that he had a USB drive on him that contained the names of intelligence officers, and he has been detained since 2018 and charged with spying. Obviously, a very serious charge in Russia, George.
Martha Raddatz, thanks. Pierre Thomas, Victor Bout, notorious arms dealer, his heyday in the 90s.
Known as the Merchant of Death. And this was a person that U.S. law enforcement had wanted to serve every bit of his sentence. But clearly, the freedom of Brittany Griner became the priority. Law enforcement knew it. They went along with this, helped facilitate it, George. But clearly, this was a man who was involved in flying weapons all across the world, including to Africa, where thousands of people were killed, supposedly with his weapons. The DEA eventually took him down in a sting operation. He's now on a plane flying back to Russia. But all smiles. A lot of people are very happy that Brittany Griner, her nightmare is over.
Pierre Thomas, Victor Bout, no real intelligence value now. I mean, all of his activities were so long ago.
Absolutely. His intelligence opportunities to wreak havoc are over. The U.S. law enforcement had tried to get information from him, obviously, but now he's of limited value in terms of intelligence. Some law enforcement officials, of course, wanted him to serve his sentence to pay a penalty for all that death that he helped bring about across the world. But again, everyone today happy that Brittany